On this edition of Somerville Neighborhood News, the legislature approved Somerville's unprecedented request for more liquor licenses. Meet the local candidates getting ready to debate before the September primary, and listening to the voices of youth. All that and more tonight on this edition of Somerville Neighborhood News.
Hello and welcome to Somerville Neighborhood News. I'm Joe Lynch. Today is Tuesday, July 19th, 2016. Somerville has become a dining and entertainment destination. The combination of new development and great local and ethnic cuisine has new establishments looking to open every week and left the city with no available liquor licenses. In the past week, both the Massachusetts House and Senate have approved an unprecedented request from Somerville for 65 new liquor licenses, and the measure now awaits the governor's signature. Last winter, we brought you the story behind this home rule petition. Here's a look at that report from Brendan Donahue.
In Massachusetts, liquor licenses are granted by the state legislature through a home rule petition. Representative Denise Provost sponsored a bill at the State House to increase the number of licenses available in Somerville.
This was a home rule petition that came from the Board of Aldermen and was signed by the mayor that wants to increase the number of liquor licenses available in the city of Somerville by the number of 65 more. I think there is a feeling that that 65 liquor licenses at one time is perhaps excessive. It's an additional.
Ms. Provost says there are frequently requests for additional licenses on the agenda, but towns are usually looking for one or two at a time. The state uses a population formula to determine the number of licenses for each municipality. According to the city of Somerville, the large request fits in with SummerVision's growth plan.
I think in general it would have a positive effect on businesses, especially a restaurant that wants to serve alcohol responsibly to responsible drinkers. I do think we have to be careful about who we issue liquor licenses to and how many we issue them to. There's a reason that we have rules set up to limit liquor licenses, so we don't want to go overboard, but I definitely do. I know there's a demand for it in Somerville.
The Assembly Row development currently has 8 restaurants and bars with liquor licenses. With more development going on, the current request sets aside 15 licenses just for Assembly Square. Alderman McLaughlin wants to make sure local businesses aren't left out.
I requested that local businesses, local-owned businesses, small businesses get priority over big businesses. The concern I would have is, who gets priority? Is it going to be the big business interest? Is it going to be small business? And I could see a situation where something like Assembly Square or something like a new business in Union Square gets a priority over a small store that could serve beer or wine with a dinner.
Charles Abel and Dan Millen are small business owners who recently went through the process of obtaining a liquor license for their new Union Square music club and restaurant, Thunder Road.
And the process itself was, it was a little nerve-wracking because it was sent to the state, and they investigate you. Both Dan and my partner, Dan Millen, and myself have been in this business before. Our credibility is untarnished. The city mandates that you have a community meeting as part of the process so that the neighbors have a chance to come and ask you questions. And we did that, and there were several neighbors there, some of which were excited for us, and some of which had some legitimate questions regarding of how we're going to present our product and how we were going to manage the property and how it would affect them. So we tried to answer any questions that they had, and I think we did a good job.
The Union United Coalition has asked for more community meetings and an impact study on how increased liquor licenses will affect local residents and neighborhoods. That kind of local scrutiny is an argument for transferring license control from the state to the municipalities. Ms. Provost is one of 22 legislators
like
signed on a
more than
petition to do
usual.
just that.
Many communities and local community leaders feel that it makes sense to have the communities themselves decide how many liquor licenses are appropriate. And in any case, they're directly accountable to the voters.
For Somerville Neighborhood News, I'm Brendan Donahue.
Representative Denise Provo told SNN she thinks the measure passed because of the thought put into crafting the request. Geographic distribution, a balance between large and small establishments, a limited number of licenses available at any one time, and the importance of dining and entertainment to Somerville's tax base all played a part. According to Ms. Provo, this could become a model for all municipal requests. Election season is in full swing, not just at the presidential level, but right here in Somerville. 2 of the 4 state legislative incumbents are facing challengers in the September 8th primary. On Thursday, July 21st, I'll be moderating 2 primary election debates hosted by Cambridge Community Television and SCAT TV between incumbent State Senator Pat Jalen and challenger Cambridge City Councilor Leland Chung, and then State Representative Tim Toomey and challenger Mike Conley. Here's an introduction to the candidates from an election profile taped earlier in June at SCAT TV.
So I want to invest in transportation, I want to invest in our communities, I want to invest in job training, but most importantly, I want to invest in education. And we are just now back to 2009 levels of funding for our schools. And the legislature talks about, charter schools pulling money out of the schools. Well, the fund that was set up to reimburse public schools for kids that left for charter schools has been underfunded for the last 5 years. All right, we need to fund our schools adequately if we want them to achieve everything that we want to achieve. And education is the cornerstone of civilization, of our democratic society. We need to invest in universal pre-K. We need to make post-secondary education to our state schools more affordable, like it used to be. We need to have community colleges that prepare young adults for jobs, to prepare them to get out into the workforce and make a living. We need to introduce computer science and science, engineering, and math into our high schools so that, when when we're attracting all these companies, and I hear a lot of people are saying, well, how do we keep more of the college students who come to school here? I think the question is backwards. I think we should be educating our kids to the point where, we can build our own workforce. When you move a company here, you already have the talent that's grown up here and lived here that can satisfy all of your needs to compete in a global economy. I want to make sure that our kids can have the training and the jobs, that they're not being displaced, but that they're competing in the jobs that we're bringing here.
Let's move on to one more issue that seems to be a central issue here, which is public transportation. Public transportation is going to affect 3 of the communities that you are striving to represent in the Senate.
So we need to invest in the green. We need to invest in transportation. But what's complicating it is we have this massive housing crunch that is the Green Line is exacerbating. And then coupled with that, we have developers from Chicago coming in, kicking people out of their homes in anticipation of the Green Line being built. If we had done this earlier and we'd grown up around it, we wouldn't have these massive kind of disproportionate effects.
My first job was as a community organizer. I never thought that I was going to be a state senator. I never thought I was going to run for public office. But I wanted to change the world, and so I became a community organizer with migrant farm workers, and I learned so much about poverty that I became convinced that the issue of income inequality is the biggest one we face as a country. And I became convinced that people working together could make a difference. So I still think of myself that way. I still think of myself as an organizer. So everything I do has its roots in the community. And I'm going to give a couple of examples. The biggest change that I've seen in my period of time in the legislature, the biggest social change I've seen has been the movement for equal marriage and now for public accommodations. And both of those things happened in an historic sense relatively fast. And they happened because thousands of people came out of the closet, told their stories, and organized. And that was very exciting. That has been a very exciting process to be part of. Well, the question that's before the voters this fall is to lift to eliminate the cap on spending on charter schools, on the money that comes out of local school budgets that goes to charter schools. So it means that local communities would no longer have control over their school budget. And it means that it also means there's an unlimited amount of money from the state budget that can go to charter schools, because we've promised to help communities make that transition. We're not keeping that promise. But let me just give 2 examples of why it's important to have local control. In Somerville, there was a proposal for a new charter school. We already have the Prospect Hill Academy, but there was a proposal for a new one, which was attractive to many people. But as people in the community learned about it, they realized that if it fulfilled its mission and got enough children to go there, the school department would have to eliminate another school because they would have to cut that much out of their budget.
How many kids who I grew up with, my peers in public housing, and how so many of them never really, had the opportunities that I had. They weren't necessarily able to access higher education or a great job. And so it's really that perspective and that experience that informs my politics and my desire to serve the community. Because as we look out in Somerville and Cambridge, we see tremendous opportunity, but we also see so many people who are looking for direction, who are asking, how do I access that opportunity?
How do you create those opportunities, especially when it comes to affordable housing, transportation, jobs in the district that you're hoping to represent?
Great question. So I think the place to start, I would suggest, would be transportation. Transportation not only is important in its own right for the environment, it also is the connector to jobs. It also has a great impact on our housing market. And I think if you start with things like the MBTA, right now today, we have well over a $7 billion deficit when it comes to our maintenance and our state of good repair backlog. And so I think we need to start by making big investments in things like the MBTA. We have to invest in affordable housing. We have to invest in higher ed. The way forward has to be to raise revenue in a variety of ways.
What would you be in favor of, Mike, in terms of raising that revenue?
I think we have to start to look at the people who can afford to pay more. So certainly the millionaires, certainly higher income earners. I'm not interested in raising revenue on the backs of working people or poor people, but I think we have the #1 inequality here in Massachusetts nationwide.
On the education side, what are you hoping to accomplish, and what are the voters saying?
I think we have to look to every child and make sure that everyone can access all of the early ed, all of the after school programs that we can possibly invest in. And as I mentioned in the intro, I benefited from a Head Start program as a kid, and then what do you know, I had the opportunity to go on to Duke and study computer science. I had the opportunity to go to Boston College Law and become an attorney. And I know for a fact, if it wasn't for that Head Start program, the odds of any of those other things happening would have been 1,000,000 to 1. And so I'm asking the question in this campaign, why is it, 30 plus years after I had that Head Start program, why can't we guarantee all of the early education, all of the after school programs that we could possibly ask for?
Big issue that I'm facing every single day with my staff is affordable housing. People coming into my office, calling, being displaced, being priced out, and how do we try to maintain that diversity and affordability of our communities. It's been the working class families have made Somerville, Cambridge the great cities they are. But as new people, everyone's attracted. Somerville and Cambridge, they're great places to live, to work, and to have recreation. And so people want to come here. So what happens, the housing prices are increased dramatically. Working very closely a lot of times with the Somerville Community Corporations. Right around the corner from us in Washington Street, they're building affordable housing units. They recently acquired the American Legion Post on Glen Street to assist in that. And they've done other projects through St. Polycarp. So one of the issues we've had in Cambridge, we've had some opposition to us because of increased density. And we had a project in Central Square, Mass and Main, which I believe my opponent did oppose. But that was 50 units of affordable housing was going to be in that development. But it's a 17-story building. So it's high, but it's right in Central Square. There's mass transit there. Most of the people are going to be moving into that development, work in the nearby Life Sciences, Kendall Square. So the impact, on the neighborhoods, would we rather have people not buying the homes that are in the neighborhood, the 2 or 3 families, and pricing people out. This way, you build up, you have some more density, and 50 units of affordable housing in one building is very important.
And it's not just pricing people out, it's creating jobs, better paying jobs, so they can afford to stay here. Well, how does it shape up over the next year or so if you're successful again in September? How's it going to shape up? I mean, have we got a jobs report in Massachusetts that looks promising?
The unemployment rate is okay, but what I'm concerned about is those kids who graduate from high school not necessarily going to college. There are a lot of, Kendall Square and Somerville Square, there are a lot of specific jobs there. But what we all need jobs for kids with vocational education is very, very important. And train them for the manufacturing of as these life sciences now develop these products, that these kids are able to be part of that and trained to which of those for the new type of jobs. I mean, that's very important. So
the debates will take place on Thursday, July 21st in the Cambridge Community Television studios located at 438 Mass Ave, Cambridge in Central Square. The first debate begins at 6 p.m. The public is invited to this free event, but studio seating is limited to a first-come, first-served basis. Check the SCAT TV and CCTV schedules, or check out the on-demand feature to watch the debates over the next few weeks. You hear it again and again, 80,000 people living in 4 square miles, making Somerville the most densely populated city in New England. That density puts a huge strain on the city's limited athletic fields and open space. While demand for playing time is increasing, open space remains the same. Reporter Dranusha Jasufi brings us the story.
This is Lincoln Park, and it is the first of 6 fields being reconstructed as a part of the recently released Somerville Fields Master Plan.
When Mayor Cortone came into office, I think one of his priorities was parks and open space. I think that I think he's always made a point of making sure there was funding available for schools and funding available for parks and open spaces.
The renovations will address not just playing fields, but sustainability issues for Somerville.
So one of the great things about this project and other projects is that we're able to think about climate change and really use our parks to ameliorate some of the wetter events that we know are coming, and to deal with localized flooding as well as larger storm events. So this park holds 1.25 million gallons of water.
Yep.
And we have smaller parks that have smaller holding capacities, and that's really important. And as people who live around here know about flooding, as Arn was mentioning, that it's something that people deal with, but it's also something that's going to become a larger problem as the climate changes and stormwater events intensify.
The master plan is a product of 4 years of discussion and public comment. The challenge for this city is balancing user needs with available resources to get the greatest capacity from the city's fields.
Given that Somerville has so little open space, it means that these parks have to serve multiple uses. And so it's not just a matter of being able to have a great playground space. It means that playground has to serve all age groups, and it's recreation, it's play, it's having making the parks more sustainable.
According to the master plan, the usage of athletic fields is high and growing. Somerville resident and youth soccer coach Jim Hanley and his daughter Maya have both been involved in field renovation discussions.
That's the magic of Somerville. We live in this wonderful, diverse, exciting, dynamic community, but we don't have a lot of open spaces. And yet we have a lot. I mean, the athletes, the demand for play is growing. Just soccer alone, which is kind of a world sport which really represents the city generally, has grown by 50% just in the last 5 years. And so if you look at the demographics and the changes in the growth of our city that's projected, we can't keep up with what we have.
Increasing capacity without the option of adding new fields raised the question of grass versus artificial turf. Building natural grass fields requires using best practices for drainage, irrigation, soil, and seed, and at least a year of rest to establish a root base after construction. Grass fields also require constant maintenance and reduced playtime. Artificial turf is more durable, allowing for more playing time, and can go into use right after construction.
Most people believe that compromise is the right way to get things done in Somerville, and that we ought to be having choice. And with a blend of turf fields and grass fields, frankly, the grass would be able to grow if you had a few turf fields.
Well, I like the turf fields because if it's raining or if it's hot or it's cold, you can still play because it doesn't get muddy, and the heat, sometimes it gets to you, but you can just drink water and take extra breaks. But otherwise, it's a soft landing. Like if I were to land on this, it will hurt a lot more than if I landed on the turf fields.
Maya is standing on Foss Field at the intersection of Broadway and McGrath-O'Brien Highway in Winter Hill. This field is not a part of the master plan because it is owned by the Department of Conservation and Recreation, or the DCR.
So I think about between 30 and 40% of the open space in the city is actually owned by the city. Over 50% is owned by the state. And we as a city, especially within the City Parks Department, don't have control of the state parks.
But Somerville has some management agreements in place for DCR-controlled parcels.
Fortunately, the mayor's office has been able to work with the state over several years and has been able to get a management agreement in place for the Dilboy Stadium and Dilboy Auxiliary Fields. So that means that our recreation department is able to program those spaces.
Renovations of state-owned parcels is complicated. It means working with the state budget constraints and bureaucracy.
How could those parks be renovated? How could Foss Park be renovated? How could Draw 7 Park be renovated? There's huge potential within both of those spaces. And we'd love to be able to work with the state to see that happen. At this point, we don't have that ability. The mayor's office is in an ongoing conversation with officials at the state.
Renovating fields does not happen quickly. Constructing drainage and sustainable irrigation means major disruption, but the results will last for years.
The construction process requires a lot of patience, but it also, in terms of field usage, means that there are displaced uses that need to be accommodated for on fields that we don't really have the capacity to accommodate on. So it just adds more pressure in the short term while the construction is happening.
For Somerville Neighborhood News, I'm Janusha Yusufi.
You can read the full plan on the Parks Department page on the city's website. We plan to bring you a story on the Youth Poetry Slam hosted by Books of Hope. But that event was postponed so participants could participate in Boston's Black Lives Matter March that same night. Reporter Jeanette O'Rehel was at the event and spoke with a Somerville participant.
Recent killings by police in Minnesota and Louisiana led mass action against police brutality to organize a protest in Boston. Demonstrators decided to take their frustration to the streets with the help of hundreds, including Somerville residents. After Books of Hope's decision to postpone a monthly teen poetry slam at the Center for the Arts at the Armory, Somerville was well represented in Roxbury.
The Poetry Slam was postponed this month so that Somerville residents can make their way here to Roxbury for the Unity March Against Police Terror. As you can see, hundreds have came out to protest the recent killing of black men and women. They hope to make their voices heard and hold police accountable for their actions.
One Somerville resident who attended the march is seeing history through her own eyes.
We weren't alive for the civil rights movement, but a lot of people that were alive for the civil rights movement are still alive today, right? And they're still trying to do the same thing, trying to promote these things. But just because we're not in that time doesn't mean that we're not fighting some of the same battles.
While Santiago says marches don't always provide an immediate solution, one thing it does provide is unity.
I felt the love and the unity, which is what I feel like is really going to just win it all, like just the love. I felt like people supporting each other. There was no violence at the rally or anything like that. It was very much so like a very understanding place without us having to really say much. No one's over here like explaining their story. People are just like understanding that we come from different paths of life, but we have one common goal, and it's to have this equality through everybody.
She says it is important for youth to witness the movement in person and feel they are part of something that is taking place nationwide.
I want them to look at life and be like, you know what, I didn't sit down silently. I wasn't just sitting at home letting the thing happen around me, letting the people around me get affected by this. I saw something bad that was happening, and I decided to get up and speak about it and protest against it.
Santiago hopes to make others understand the Black Lives Matter movement the way she understands it now.
You know, in the beginning, I didn't understand the whole Black Lives Matter movement. I would say, you know, all lives matter because I'm a Latina. And I'm like, all right, but what about my brown life? Does my brown life matter? And understanding it's not that Black Lives Matter stands for like your life doesn't matter. No, it's that systematically and through years and years of oppression, Black lives haven't mattered. And now it's the time where we do have to make them matter.
She takes the opportunity to educate those who are not aware or don't understand the movement.
You're a human like I'm a human. I bleed like you bleed. So I'm gonna teach you because no one else decided to teach you. I'm going to be the enlightenment that you need. I'm going to help you flow even if you're not loving me right now, because I believe love is really what's going to solve it all.
For Somerville Neighborhood News, I'm Jeanette Orihed.
Local fruits and vegetables are a highlight of summer in New England, but urban living can make finding them difficult. Shape Up Somerville and Groundwork Somerville have kicked off their 6th year of the Somerville Mobile Farmers Market. The market brings fresh produce at a discount to 4 locations throughout the city on a weekly basis. Here's a look at that program.
This season, the crops are doing pretty good. We have a few acres on this side of South Street Farm and a few others, and we have several farms all around Somerville that we farm from. So it's been good, though. Weather's been good. We have a lot of people turning out to help out, and it's great.
The food that we produce gets sold throughout neighborhoods in Somerville, and many of which don't have access to fresh, healthy foods.
Yeah, the mobile market is something we're partnered with Shape Up Somerville. So it's a market that provides fresh produce to areas in Somerville that might have issues getting the produce. So it has a schedule, and it runs every week. Our green team, our youth volunteers help run it with some of our interns and our staff as well. We grow all sorts of things. We grow eggplant, tomatoes, cilantro, broccoli, cabbage, you name it. We have all different types of things patched around.
The mobile market makes 2 stops on Fridays. First at the Council on Aging, 167 Holland Street from 11 to 1, and moves to the East Somerville Community School at 50 Cross Street from 3:30 to 5:30. And there are 2 on Saturdays. At the North Street Housing Development, 26 North Street from 10:30 a.m. till noon, and at the Mystic Housing Development, 530 Mystic Avenue from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. For more information, call Shape Up Somerville at 617-625-6600, extension 4321. And that's our newscast for tonight. We'll be back on August 2nd at 7 p.m. on Channel 3. Check out all of our stories at somervilleneighborhoodnews.org. Somerville Neighborhood News is a community service production of SCAT TV. We invite you, our neighbors, to get involved. Visit our Facebook page, SCATVSNN, to comment. Tweet us at SCATVSNN. Call us at 617-628-8826 or email us at news@scatvsomerville.org. I'm Joe Lynch, wishing you a happy, healthy, and safe summer season. Thanks for joining us. See you around the neighborhood.